Greetings, my guest speakers and audience. I am Dr. Vaneeta Aggarwal, founder and CEO of Bizemag Media, which is a marketing technology broadcast media, and we keep organizing events offline as well as virtual mode on contemporary issues. Today, the most significant topic all over the nation is the budget that was announced yesterday by Finance Minister. And we are here to discuss what is the new budget. Are there any changes? What would be the impact? What should have been there if something is missing? So I will start with my first guest speaker, Dr. Bigyan Verma, who is director of IMT Nagpur. I will also request to give to him that please briefly introduce yourself to our audience, and then tell us what changes do you find or funds allocation to the education sector, and what impact would it make?
Thank you so much, Dr. Vaneeta, for giving me this an opportunity. It's so wonderful, so nice of you. My name is Bigyan Verma. I'm primarily an academician. I spent more than 2.5 decades in education. I started my career by teaching at XLRI Jamshedpur. Then for about 5-6 years, I worked as an investment banker for Morgan Stanley. And thereafter, I worked for a Canadian university called Carleton in Ottawa, taught there, taught at IMU Kozhikode. So I'm primarily an academician, but I've also spent some time in the financial services industry as an investment banker as such. So I have a nice and decent perspective. I remember when I was working for JM Morgan Stanley, one day before the budget, I used to be in Bombay. We will run to Delhi just to get the budget papers immediately after the announcements, because we needed to decipher, we needed to read between the lines, and we needed to see what the budget throws for an investment banker and corporate, which we can encash. So that's how we really got associated closely with the reading the budget between the lines as such. Let me admit, right in the beginning, ma'am, that the announcements made by the finance minister should not be faulted as a populist budget, for it did not throw subsidies or SOPs in the entire budget. It remained absolutely realistic, and it kind of addresses structural issues for almost all segments of the population, and has large number of great messages for large number of sectors as such. Now let's also not forget the fact that this being the post-pandemic budget, it has accepted, it had a lot of fiscal limitations, and therefore the budget all through, it nudges the private sector to rise up and show what they can do for India to make sure that the India, travels to the journey of being one of the developed nations by 2047. So there's a big role in the budget for the private sector also, and they will have to get up and then make sure that India rises up, and it grows. This is also the Amrit Kal budget. And we all know that none of the budget ever in any country has been a position to please everyone. Same is the case over here also. But there would always be skeptics and the critics in any budget anywhere in the world. But and there will always be a lot of discussion. So which is very, very healthy for a democratic country like India. And therefore, we should also be open for discussions and deliberations as such. But I really feel that the budget is sincerely continuing the growth story. And some of the pillars of the budget, when I went through, I've not read the entire budget completely in association with the finance bill, but some of the pillars of the budget, I feel that it is really throwing a lot of focus on what we call as the inclusive development. It's trying to reach the last mile, because we always have a lot of promises, but we can't reach the last mile. There's a lot of focus on infrastructure investment. It tries to unleash the potential in almost very many sectors, and it's focusing on green growth, because let's not forget the fact that the world is focusing on ESG, and that can only be driven by the demographic advantage which we have from the youth. So there's a lot of focus on the youth power, financial sector, and on the tech development. So, by and large, I really feel that it's a very nice, decent budget. Limitations are there. We'll talk about it later. But then on the whole, it's been a wonderful announcement. Now, with regard to education per se, You know, we all know that the COVID-19 and the lockdown for almost what 2.5 years severely impacted the Indian, especially the school-going children as such. You know, making them sit in front of a laptop or on a computer for hours is really not possible. And because most of the time the growth of kids actually happens outside the classroom when they play with their peers, and then they go for various kinds of activities. So after nearly 3 years of massive disruption caused by the pandemic, the country's education sector is now looking forward to a new era, and that's what the budget promises. Uh, Bridging the gap with the Indian education had to face because of the pandemic and the expectations for the future will be critical, is going to be critical, and that's what the budget is focusing on. And let's also not forget the fact the world is also changing with regard to new systems, new technologies, and they are going to be a part of the education as such. Now I'm focusing essentially from the school level children point of view as such. So the budget has a lot of focus on that. If you allow me to talk about some of them, I can do that right away. But the fact of the matter is the education sector has received the highest ever allocation since independence of rupees 1.12 lakh crores. And a substantial part of that is going for school education, which is absolutely something really to be thought about. Because education is one enabling factor, which is going to be an enabling factor for the youth who will emerge to be the power for this nation as such, man. Over to you.
Yeah, you rightly said that this time a very high budget on education, but that is required also seeing the young population which is to be educated and which is under the bracket of getting educated is required. And to bring in the ed tech, the new technologies, the new smart classes, the new education policy implementation, this kind of budget is definitely required. Moving over to Brigadier Aggarwal, Sanjay Aggarwal. Since you have been security advisor, I would like you to emphasize on the defense budget this time.
Okay, you also want me to give an introduction of myself?
Yes, please. Brigadier Sanjay Aggarwal, please introduce yourself to our audience first.
Okay, good evening, viewers. It's a pleasure to be with all of you, courtesy Dr. Vaneeta Aggarwal. We are not related and I have never met her. Disclosure. So, very briefly, I have been the full-time advisor to the National Highway Authority of India, and that's a major part of my corporate exposure. I did 36 years in the army as an officer, retired 8 years ago. I am currently a distinguished professor at SRM University, Chennai's NCR campus. I also teach at IMT Ghaziabad and various other institutes. I conduct motivation speaking all over the country and abroad. I also speak on geopolitical issues, India and abroad, including at NATO. I've also been the president of the Services Selection Board for the country, which selects young men and women to become officers in the Indian Army, Navy, and Air Force over an intensive 5-day selection process. So that's briefly about me. Yes, ma'am. Now your question.
So starting with the defense budget, because you have been security advisor at Ministry of Home Affairs, I would ask, what do you think about what is it right kind of fund allocation to the defense, and what would be the impact and how it would be utilized?
Okay, so when we look at the overall budget and then within that we look at the defense, you are aware of what percentages have been given to various heads, who has got what. Suffice to say that the union budget has given about 593,000 crores to the total defense budget. And within that, the capital expenditure is up from last year by 7%, because the numbers will not mean much to the viewers. What the viewers you are interested in, what is the change from last year? And by the way, very importantly, this budget includes defense pensions, and defense pensions includes pensions of civilians. Defense budget, I say again, includes pensions of civilians paid from the defense estimate, which means the entire AFHQ, Armed Forces Headquarters cadre, the entire DRDO, the Ministry of Defense with its various DGQA, and so many such arms. DGQA is Director General Quality Assurance. All this is paid for from defense budget. So that is that. So capital expenditure is up 7%. Revenue expenditure is up 16%. Not a healthy trend. We would like more to go up in capital expenditure, but revenue expenditure is growing, and that is why the Agnipath concept has come in. I'll just speak another sentence about it when I come to that. Defense pensions have gone up by 15%, the allocations we are talking about, and the Ministry of Defense civil expenditure has gone up 13%. Overall, the total budget for the defense has gone up 13%. Now, within this defense budget, some of you would be wondering, how much has the Army, Navy, and Air Force got? So, out of the total capital expenditure of 162,600 crores, 23%, which is less than 1/4, comes to the Army, which manpower-wise is the biggest. The Navy gets 32%, which is almost 1/3, and the Air Force gets 35%, which is a little more than 1/3. And research and development, inspection, technology development, all that gets a meager 10%. So the key takeaways here are the fact that within the three services, the Navy and the Air Force get about 1/3, the Army gets 1/4, and the 10% only is for R&D. And this is my observation across the union budget, that the allocations for R&D, except a bright spark where money has been allocated for agri-tech startups, that is a bright spot. But other than that, I find I could not see R&D allocations to be as high as one would have wanted them. Defense is one proof. Next point on the defense budget is that a positive thing is that with bulk of our people being between the 12 to 15 lakh slab now, there, because of the new tax regime, etc., they would pay only 20% tax. So that is from our user angle. Also from the direct taxation angle, the Agnipath Scheme 1, the payments received from the Agnipath corpus by that Agniveer, that young man or woman who will join for 4 years, this is proposed to be exempt from tax. So that corpus, that kitty would be intact in that person's hands. And of course, you are aware that this Agnipath scheme, though it was never spoken about on the finance issue, people in the know are very clear that it is the prime mover behind this scheme has been the financial motive. Thank you.
Thank you, Brigadier Aggarwal. You have really enlightened us on the defense budget. What are the different schemes? Because defense generally is untouched from common people. It's a very far off thing, except for, yes, we do have respect. We do understand sometimes when some events happen and we watch it on news or in cinema. But it's very important to know from a person who is directly related to defense in such a deep manner. Moving on to Mohit Khandelwal, who is a chartered accountant and runs his own company. Mohit, please introduce yourself. And, for common person, everybody sticks glues to the TV screen when budget is announced, whether he's a finance person or not. Myself, I belong to science and technology sector. And my finance information is almost, you can say, on 0 to 10, 1. Okay, so that's my understanding of finance and budget and economy. I am slowly learning, trying to slowly learn. So for me, main thing is, am I saving on tax? Right? How this budget, more or less, it is about taxation, about whether our income become taxable below a slab or above a slab. So I would like you to put light on, because I understand there has been some changes in the tax slab structure this time. How would it affect a homemaker, first thing, a homemaker woman, a person who is lower income strata but files an income tax return? and for startups.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am, for giving me this opportunity to present in this forum. Let me introduce myself. My name is Mohit Khandelwal. I am qualified chartered accountant. I am currently in practice. I am having my office in Jaipur. Coming up to your question, yeah, there is a slight change in the slab rate this year, but there is no change in the old regime. The only changes are there in the new regime. According to new regime, if a person is earning 7 lakhs, up to 7 lakhs, then he is not required to pay any tax, as he will get rebate. So government wants that the person in India should shift from investment to new regime, where they are not allowed to invest in any ATC direction or LIC mutual funds. They want that they should shift from old regime to new regime. Firstly,
So
and
I'll interrupt here. What do you mean by old regime and new regime? So what does it mean?
okay, let me tell you, the Ministry of Government provides two regime. Person can opt either old regime or new regime. There is a
Okay.
difference in slab rate. According to old regime, if you are earning up to 2,50,000, then you are not supposed to pay any tax. If you are earning between 2,50,000 to 5 lakhs, you are supposed to pay 5% of tax, which comes to 12,500. But according to Section 87A of Income Tax Act 1961, the government gives you a rebate of 12,500. So we can say that if a person is earning up to 5 lakhs, then he is also not required to pay any tax because he will get the benefit of rebate. In if he is earning above 5 lakhs to 10 lakhs, then he is supposed to pay tax at the rate 20%. And if he is earning more than 10 lakhs, then he is supposed to pay tax at the rate 30%. This is the old
Okay.
regime.
Mhm.
And but government last financial year, the government has introduced new regime also. According to that new regime, there are few changes this year. In this, up to 3 lakhs, if you are opting for new regime, then up to 3 lakhs you are exempted from tax. If you are earning from 3 lakhs to 6 lakhs, then you are supposed to pay 5% tax rate. If you are earning from 6 lakhs to 9 lakhs, you are supposed to pay 10%. From 9 to 12, you are supposed to pay 15. From 12 to 15, you are supposed to pay 20. And above 15 lakhs, you are supposed to pay 30%. But here, what we get is in this budget, if you are earning up to 7 lakhs and you have opted for new regime, then also you will be get benefited of Section 87A, which is rebate under Section 87A as per Income Tax Act. So there will be saving of around 15,000 if you opt for new regime. Every year, individual salaried person, they have to opt whether they want to pay tax as per old regime or new regime. But from next financial year, we have to, if we are opting old regime, then we do not have to disclose it in while filing the ITR. But from the next financial year, if you are opting for old regime, then you have to disclose it. This is
Okay.
basically.
So may I interrupt here to clarify this? What Mohit has said is absolutely right. But dear viewers, for you, what it means is earlier you had a choice, you still have a choice, but now the default is the new regime. If you
Yes.
have to go to the old regime, there is a small form which you or your CA will fill up for you. But the default setting now from financial year 23-24, assessment year 24-25, is that the default setting is new regime, but it is not forcing you. You can still stay on old regime.
Oh.
However, it is only for those who can leverage the various rebates, PPF, etc. They will want to stay on the old regime. The government is incentivizing move to new regime. Thank you.
This year's government has also given a standard direction to person who are opting new regime. This is the new updation in this regime. Previously, all those person who are opting for new regime are not supposed to take the standard direction of 50,000. But for this financial year 23-24, they are supposed to take the standard direction of 50,000. But if the gross total income is above 15 lakhs 50,000, then he will be given a benefit of 52,500. This is the nice step. If someone opts for new regime, then he will be get benefited of a standard deduction. which may vary from 50,000 to 52,500 depending on his income.
Thanks for this opportunity. So I'll go to the two speakers, starting with the latest, Mohit. Old and new, I understand quite all right, and by default, etc. is fine. There was some figure given. 50,000 standard deduction is applicable for both. Am I right? The second part is what I invest in PPF, 1.5 is the limit, is applicable only for the old system. Suppose I don't have any saving. My understanding is it'll be correct on my part to shift to the new system, which is in many cases by default. So there was some figure quoted that in case you can get exemption up to the tune of 3.24 or 3.74 lakh or something, then you quit. Otherwise, new is beneficial for others. A little more on this, Mohitji. Yeah.
So I can't hear you properly. Can you please repeat
My
it?
question is that in case you are having a background also is from DRDO. I'm a gunner. I'm an artillery officer. I commanded 31 medium regiment. And I served 4 years, 87 to 91, when late APJ Abdul Kalam, Bharat Ratna, was the defense minister's scientific advisor. I had the privilege of hosting him there because I was a project manager for Akash Trishul missile carrier.
Wow.
And my question now is on defense. I think you covered Agniveer, you covered the capital expenditure. That is the weaponization part. You expressed your concerns already. And you said R&D is barely 10%. Am I right? Right. Isn't it possible that since we are gradually moving away from the DRDO toward privatization, so part of the expenditure possibly is being taken over by the private sector rather than DRDO? Could that be one of the reasons? And
Okay, so let me answer this in two parts. First part, yes. Second part. So far, largely what has been happening, because I was the single window for DRDO clearances in the MHA, and they were very keen to sell their products to all the CAPF, CRPF, BSF, CISF, etc. So what is happening with the DRDO is two things. Firstly, what you said, and an unqualified yes, that R&D is also now being taken on by the private sector. Now there is a chicken and egg situation there, that whoever invests, and it is big money, needs assurances of market, of orders. And therefore the second model which has been existing is that the DRDO does the R&D. Once the R&D is validated, prototypes are made with public-private partnership sometimes. And once the validations are near over, that project is then given to civil. Example, drones. So there is some technology developed. And by the way, in the last 8 years now, DRDO is turning a new leaf. There has been a lot of pressure. If you see the old Comptroller and Auditor General's reports on DRDO, आपके आंख में आंसू आ जाएंगे, इतना खराब सरकारी विभाग.
Take example of Arjun tank.
But just let me
Arjun
finish
tank.
this one.
Yeah.
But now you are only hearing good news. That is because DRDO has made 7 new labs. The directors, when they were made 3 years ago, are below 35 years of age. It is totally corporatized, and they have got the full powers. Yes, Anil sir, you were saying.
That's very encouraging. In fact, the path which you described for prototype and onward to private was exactly followed by DRDO Avadi and L&T.
Absolutely.
Project was Nag missile. They were pretty involved. Wonderful.
Good.
And Atmanirbhar, would you like to say something? Because my concern is there's a time lag. In the long term, definitely we should be as much self-sufficient as we can. No country is fully self-sufficient. But you know, as the things are developing and we are facing threat from two fronts, little bit of concern as a soldier. But in the long term, what you're saying
I
is quite worthy.
just wanted to say something. I'm not an army person at all, but I read where that the focus of this budget is a lot on defense sustenance. Is that the correct analysis?
No, initially when I was trying to put the budget into context,
Mhm.
I had this hope. I still have the hope, but I haven't seen the proof of the pudding.
No, because they're talking about 44% hike in the sustenance part of the budget.
No, what does sustenance mean?
In the sense, like to make sure that you have all spare parts and the weapon systems and everything is in place.
No,
To
see, one is, and we have given a presentation to the Prime Minister and the Parliament by the Vice Chief of the Indian Army.
Mhm.
We are talking on the budget, so I don't want to take the discussion away from the budget too much, but in 20 seconds. This logistics, there is already a backlog which when A.K. Antony was the defense minister, he had referred to, you have already pre-made commitments. So what
Okay.
logistics, when you say sustenance, it is actually the maintenance logistics. So
Absolutely.
there are financial commitments made for that.
So
And
critical spare parts and
despite
all.
repeated asking for non-lapsable rollover funds, we have not got them.
Okay.
And bureaucracy, how it is and how it has improved. Yes, it has improved, but how it still is, no comments. So net, I have not seen proof of a very rosy picture for the defense. What I am seeing is that the OROP commitment, which is "Oont ke muh mein jeera," has not been given. And we are still going around in circles in the semantics of it. And what Anil sir said, he is right. And overall in the country, when we are talking of Atmanirbharta, we are giving 76,000 crores for chips. Very right. But the overall R&D, the startup thing is improving, the Atmanirbharta is improving. So rhetoric, very good. I would love somebody to show me the paisa. The financial allocation is the proof of intent, not the verbal part. So somebody has to tell me on so and so page of the budget, this much allocation has been made for this technology or for this defense, which I have not seen yet. I could be incomplete or I could be ignorant also.
A very frank point. Absolutely wonderful.
Ma'am, coming back to education, I just wanted to make a point. Is that okay? Hello?
You are mute, Dr. Vaneeta.
He
No, I
has
could
just
hear him.
joined us, Professor Sudhir Gavhane.
Okay.
Thank you, sir, for joining.
Yeah.
Please introduce briefly yourself. I know panelists do not need but our viewers, some of our viewers may.
Mhm.
Yeah. Let me introduce myself. I'm Professor Sudhir Gavhane. I was Vice Chancellor of the Maharashtra Open University based in Nashik, that is by CMU, second largest open university in India. Then I was founder Vice Chancellor of the Mahatma Gandhi Mission University in Aurangabad. I was Dean Director of the MIT World Peace University, Pune. And basically, I am higher educationist and interested in studying higher education sector, global and national. Yeah.
So, sir, what is your views on budget announcements that was made yesterday on higher education and in general, from text point of view?
Coming directly to the higher education sector, I am unhappy with the provisions made because the NEP 2020 was assuring to the higher education sector and people of India that the 6% of the GDP will be allocated to the education sector. That has not happened. some
Exactly.
amount provision is increased, but that increment is not appropriate to the GDP ratio. So our GDP ratio is still 2.9. Okay, for education. Even for health also, it is just 2.5. So the two major sectors which will empower the nation, empower the economy, create the prototypes, develop the industry, that is human capital. And that is the vision of the NEP 2020. When the central government itself is not indicating that it is giving priority as defense to the education and health, as health is a health defense of our country, and education is the defense of the future of our country. And if in two domains and pillars we are not appropriately investing and not understanding the problems we have faced during Corona, and at the same time my colleagues were discussing about the R&D. Our GDP contribution to the R&D is just 0.65, and that of Korea is 4.6. Many countries are investing 4% of the GDP for research, R&D only. And where are we? And where is the indication of that, some symbolic provision is not important. What I personally feel that drastic change in the budgetary provision is very important. Having 100 nursing schools will not suffice. We need to develop hospital infrastructure, public hospital infrastructure in the rural part of India as well as the urban small towns in India. That provision I am not seeing. Particularly, I am very much interested in the education sector where the improvement of quality enhancement has been neglected by the budget, I personally feel. And that will make great impact. And it will not bring Amrut Kal for India if we are not investing in health and education. So the figures are not telling the truth. Figures are being, just statistically speaking, 1,11,000 crores is not the right amount. It has to be in proportion to the GDP. And if we see global scenario, that I am saying that there are countries which are investing more than 6%, more than 5%, more than 4.5%, and we are nowhere in comparison with that. And basically, we are very weak in quality of our universities. Private universities we are inviting, but at the same time, we should have been empowered our own select quality universities, public and private both, by providing them resources. Maybe that can be a loan resource, like we are providing to farmers. But that has not happened. And for one global quality university to establish, we need 7 to 8,000 crores. The already developed institution like IITs, IIMs, and public and private universities select, they are definitely around 40 to 50. If we give such kind of impetus for the development and being competitive globally, then our universities will be able to compete with the 500 international universities which are, we have invited them to come to India. It's good for competition. It is good for development. It is good for quality enhancement. But when our own universities are weak and we are not providing them equal opportunity to play a level playing field in economics terms, then I think we are going in a wrong direction. So R&D, number one, quality of higher education. Number two, quality of school education. And overall improvement in the education sector is the most important priority sector should have been made by the government of India. We want to execute. So this is the problematic execution of NEP. So words are very flowery, right? Very pleasing, but on ground, it is not being seen. I am very sad that for defense we are investing more than around 5.5 lakh crores. It is required, I agree. But at the same time, for the social defense of the R&D, defense of the society, futuristic knowledge economy, we need to invest into higher education, which China has done in last 20 years. And therefore, they could develop the world-class universities in China. This is my opinion, straightforward, clear-cut. Yeah, Vaneeta, over to you.
Vaneeta, you are muted.
Thank you, sir, for voicing your honest opinion, which is heartfelt. Yes, government has increased education funding allocation, but they need to do more. We have Mr. Neeraj Saxena, who is Managing Director of Xscale, who is an angel investor and promotes startups ecosystem by funding them. Neeraj, will you please welcome on board and please briefly introduce yourself to the viewers? You have to unmute yourself. Unmute, please.
Yeah, may I add one, joke and cartoon I saw today. There were young boys standing and someone was telling them that, see, in income tax, lot of remission and concessions has been given. You should be happy. Then he said those boys said, we don't have income. We need that. So that kind of reactions from, very truth-telling reactions are coming. So is this our budget is centered for middle class, upper middle class, or is it addressing to the 95% population, which is aspiring population, and they need education and health in a better format and qualitative.
Sure.
Education,
Thank you, sir.
cost.
Yeah, we will come back to those questions later on. So welcome on board, Neeraj. Please briefly introduce yourself.
Thanks, Vaneeta, for having me here. Hi, my name is, as you mentioned already, is Neeraj Saxena. I am Managing Director of Xscale. So we are a company who invest in Indian B2B SaaS startup and also at the same time help them scale their business in Indian and international markets. So that's a quick and then short introduction about us.
So what is your take on this budget announcements? Our previous panelists pointed out that there has been very less allocation on R&D in every sector in general, right? And since you are related to startup ecosystem, and which basically means R&D based, because any startup means some innovative solution or they are making or they are producing or service or product, whatever. So what do you think in relation to the startups, in relation to the corporate, in relation to this R&D?
Absolutely. So I will definitely share my thoughts. So ultimately, so just 3 days back, on my LinkedIn profile, I shared what are my expectations, from this budget, especially for the startup ecosystem, right? And in defense to that, I'd like to touch upon what has been addressed and what has been left out, and I'll specifically answer your question on R&D as well, right? So some of let me talk about the positive things first, right? So first positive thing is that there is a section under which the company is incorporated as a startup and granted a DPIT, the startup certificate, are exempted for paying income tax or allowed to have tax holidays for 3 years. The earlier date for those companies, they have to be registered before 31st March 23. That has been extended to now 31st March 24. That is the end of the next financial year. And it looks like they will extend it year by year. So they are taking a policy on it, taking a shot on it year by year. So that's a very positive sign that in the next year, all the companies that are being incorporated in the next financial year will enjoy those tax benefits. There are quite a few other benefits under that section. So that's one positive sign, at least for the next coming year for the Indian startup ecosystem. The second positive thing is the carry forward of the losses. Of a regular company is normally 7 years. For a startup, there are some caveats, but has been extended for a startup, it has been extended to 10 years. Now, this is a great sign because most of the startup don't make any money, or normally they are burning, they are, surviving on the venture capital and a burn mode. So 7 years was absolutely a term which was less than the reality. And 10 years is a much more realistic term that they should be able to carry forward the losses, and once they become profitable, they can set off those losses. So again, it's a positive news for the startup ecosystem. The third, I think the major positive news here is that there is an India startup seed fund scheme, right? The Startup India Seed Fund. So the allocation for that have gone up quite significantly. So last year the allocation in the budget was 100 crore. This year it was 283 crores. So again, a very positive sign because that's a scheme which is, I would say, fairly easy accessible to most of the startups. A lot of the startups we know that got benefited out of that scheme. So a very positive sign to promote the entrepreneurship in the country. So very positive three things. And interestingly, I have put two of the asks in my ask from the finance minister in my LinkedIn post, right? So those two things have been taken care of. So that's amazing or very, very positive. What has been missed out, right? Let's discuss about that. One of the key things that has been missed out is the parity of the LTCG tax on the startup investment versus the listed equity. So today, startup investment does not enjoy the same kind of LTCG rate that is allowed or that is available to the listed equity, which is not a good thing because now on one hand we are promoting the startups. We want, and for a startup to survive, they need capital. You all understand that to build a business, a capital is required, and there are investors who are putting their money behind that, taking all the more risk than a listed equity. They are obviously startup investments are far riskier than the listed equity, right? Investments. And at the same time, they are penalized by charging higher, long-term capital gain tax, which should have been addressed. I think this is asked for now at least a few years now, and that has not been addressed. So that's a one big miss, I would say, in this was the biggest miss, I would say, from the startup ecosystem ask perspective, right? There are a few other things which does not, been again addressed. Now, what is the, and then this is very specific to venture capital and venture capitalists, right? What is the tax treatment on some of the components that venture capital fund has? There are management fees, carry, etc. There is still ambiguity in some of those areas that what is the tax treatment on such income for a venture capital fund, right? How it should be treated. It has been debated, etc., at different forums to the extent, so certain notice has been sent. And then basically there is not 100% transparency. So that has to be brought in because if you want to make venture capital, more accessible, you want more international investors to come in or even the domestic investor to participate more, you need to make the rules very transparent, very clear, and at the same time in line with the international rules. So that's another thing that has been left out again. And I think the one bigger thing which also needed, some kind of thought from the government is the FDI investment in a startup, right? So theoretically, I think the FDI inflow and outflow looks fairly easy. They say this is automatic route, etc. But I think there is still a lot of rules and regulation when you bring in capital, and by the way, it is fairly complicated when you take out the capital out of the country. Now, if you make that taking out the capital difficult, you will find that international investors are scary of putting in the capital back in India. This is the third big problem that has not been addressed out. So I would say these are the three hits and three biggest misses from my point of view. Just to address your question in R&D, yes, I think what the other panelists has said is right. R&D budget has not gone up significantly. Addressing in context of the startup space, look, startup space hardly gets any R&D budget from the government. So it does not, have a direct impact or a major impact on a startup ecosystem, because it's not like there are government schemes on R&D, etc., from where the startups directly get any R&D budgets. There are certain programs, some DSIT schemes, etc. Sometimes, they buy the DSIT, IDEX. So there are certain kind of, the schemes that are there through which a startup gets some grant for innovation. But I think, but most of the startup R&D is funded by, either, the venture capital mostly, right? Or from their own operational expense, right? So had they increased it, it was obviously created a much more positive impact on long-term economic growth. So yeah, I think, obviously that's something that needs improvement in years to come. But that's where I think I rest, my case. Yeah. So that's in a nutshell what I feel about budget. Vaneeta, back to you. I think you are on mute.
You'll have to unmute. Yes.
Yeah. So before taking queries raised by two members, we will go on to our next guest speaker, who is Captain Shekhar Gupta. Captain Shekhar Gupta, please switch on your video and unmute yourself. Shekhar Gupta. Shekhar, are you there? I can see you on screen, but I think he is. Ria, please call Mr. Shekhar Gupta.
Okay, ma'am.
Yeah, so there were two raised till the time Shekhar joins us. There were two raised hands. If you can.
Yeah, can I chip in? Can I chip in, ma'am?
Yes, please.
No, I just wanted to, reflect on what Professor Gavhane was talking about, and his focus was, the lack of support to the education system, of course, which has gone up of late. But then, when and I would like to comment on, especially from the point of view of what we call as the new education policy 2020. And when that policy was launched, I remember a movie called Three Idiots, which made mockery of the many ills of the education system that prevailed in India. Time and again in that movie, Amir Khan proved that the education system just does not lead to improved knowledge. It only leads to a lot of pressure on kids and rote learning. And there's one professor called Professor Sugata Mitra from Oxford. He has written a book called Hole in the Wall, and you'll also find he's a great TED speaker. One can find his talk on the net, and he's extremely critical of the education system. And he says the education system does not really allow students to, or anyone to can think creatively as such. And that's the reason one of the statements which was made by the Prime Minister when he said, till date, we've been focusing on what to think in our education policy. And now we must start thinking in terms of how to think. And that is precisely what this budget is talking about. It is really trying to ensure that the ideas of a national education policy gets implemented, and there's a lot of focus on that. And what does it really talk about? The salient features of new education policy talks about scalability. It talks about the universal access at all levels of school education. It talks about attaining foundational literacy in numbers, in technologically speaking, and there has to be a huge reform in the curriculum and pedagogy, and it actually focuses on the childhood care and education. Now, if you look into the salient features of the education budget in the presented by the finance minister, it talks about what? It says some of the salient features which are extremely impressive. It talks a lot about a focus on effective teacher training as such. It's trying to build a resilient mechanism for education delivery so that the quality also improves. It is trying to train teachers and the students for innovative pedagogy. Nice and decent curriculum must really come in the focus. There has to be continuous professional development. There has to be dipstick service to find out whether there is any advantage, what is the outcome of whatever classes or are conducted as such. There's a lot of focus on ICT implementation because that's the only way you can be scalable. There's a lot of focus on national digital library for children and adolescents. So it also talks about making AI, artificial intelligence, work for India. These are excellent things because these are all experiential. This is the only way. We will not just provide education for the heck of it, for the sake of it, but the current budget is for saying that let us now also start helping students think creatively, because that's one thing which is going to sustain in what we call as the VUCA world as such. Ma'am, over to you.
Mohit, you wanted to say something?
I just want to add one thing in the startup. Recently, yesterday in the yesterday budget, there was one amendment in the startup that in case if there is any change in the shareholding, then the loss can be carried forward from 7 years to 10 years. That means they are getting 3 years advantage. They will be able to carry forward the losses for upcoming next 3 years. This is one of the advantage which government is providing to startups now.
Okay. I
You
think
see, when we
Shekhar
are
has
talking
left.
of this budget,
Yeah.
my first thing is to put this budget into context. What is the international context and the domestic context? And there I find that you see what is happening in the world. 2 days ago, the IMF economic growth projections have come out. We all know the percentages of that. India, this current financial year expected is 6.8. It will go down to 6.1%. And in 24, it will rise again to 6.8%. Our nearest competitor for this year is UK at 4.1%, who for next year will go into negative growth, minus 0.6. Otherwise, our most mind space is with China. China has grown this year at 3.0, but next year, 5.26. It's phenomenal. But it will come down to 4.5 next year. So UK, I've told you, US presently 2.0%, and next year it will be at 1.4%. And America, the recession and the lies that they are telling, we all know about it. So this is one indicator on the international context of the Indian budget, that India has an excellent growth and an excellent growth forecast in comparison to the rest of the world. The way we have handled COVID, the way we have handled production of COVID-related PPE, oxygen, etc., has done our economy good. We are moving not only to sufficiency, but to export. So that is good. The global growth is expected to fall from 3.4% this current fiscal to 2.9% before it rises to 3.1 in 2024. So for India, the recession risks have subsided. We have made progress. We have buffered our society from inflation much better than most other countries of the world. Our policies on import of raw oil, etc., have kept our petroleum prices under check. But the Ukraine war is not over. China's COVID lies are not over. So new surprises may be on the way. So with this as the international context, if you see the domestic context, Prime Minister said, budget vanchiton ko variyat deta hai. Very true. We are providing to meet the justifiable aspirations of all segments of our society. So that is why we see who gets what, different sections of society. Plus, again, from domestic to international, the budgetary commitments are proof to the world about where India's priority lies. Because political rhetoric is one thing, budgetary commitment and allocation is clear proof of a country's intentions and priorities. Of course, we have revised estimates and later allocations. That's a different matter. So that part, these two things combined give us a very positive picture. And that 20-page document that was released and all CAs forwarded to everybody. So all of you must have got at least 15, 20 copies of that 20-page government document. It is informative. The Saptarishi, the 7 areas of focus of the budget, etc., that's government talk, which is positive. The actual impetus to Gati Shakti, that's a positive. Thank you.
Thank you, Brigadier Aggarwal. I can see that you have deeply understood the budget and nicely put up in the international and national context. Yes, we should, as a democratic country and as intellects, look at positive and look at missed parts which needs more, focus in coming years. Yes, we have been progressive. As a layman, I can tell you that my mate does not like to be called poor now. And that's a positive sign of society. She doesn't like to be called poor. In COVID, they got some funds to sustain in their banks. That was a big relief to them. Obviously, NGOs also worked, people also in their personal, individual capacity worked towards them. But for sure, funding in their banks from the government helped them a security, a sense of security. Then COVID vaccination, the way massively it was given to all the masses, irrespective of their creed, caste, or gender, or the financial status. Obviously, it is laudable because it was a massive disaster in our country. In any country, obviously throughout the world, it was seamless tragedy which happened, and we are able to come out of that as of now. And as you said, surprises may be there, and we need to keep alert for that. But yes, there are areas which needs more focus, and highlighting them will help government to think over them. As per me, I always write emails wherever possible to the ministries, to the departments. I give my suggestions as a layman or as whatever I feel that it should be taken up. Some of them have been taken up by the authorities. So I see that this government has ears. It hears you, it listens to you, it takes up suggestions, it gives these suggestions to the committees comprising of experts like all of you, and they are heard through. So we should keep on working, and that's what I tell my friend circle also. It's very easy to blame anyone for that matter, opposition or the government. You can choose parties and you can blame anyone. That's very easy to do over a cup of coffee. But if you have any complaint right now, there are social medias. Please put up a tweet. Please put up a message to the government. Say we are not happy with this. This should be this way. Because जनता की आवाज सरकार तक पहुंचेगी तो सरकार उसके ऊपर ध्यान देगी और कुछ काम करेगी. तो आवाज तो पहुंचानी जरूरी है, अच्छी भी, और जो हमें नहीं समझ आता वो भी, जो हमें चाहिए वो भी. Right? Thank you so much for your time. I think it's okay. Thank you so much for being here for this intellect discussion.
It was very nice to listen to my panelists today.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. Pleasure meeting all of you. Namaskaram, Professor Sudhir, Gavhane sahib. And pleasure listening to you, Neeraj, as well. And the others we have introduced ourselves earlier. Thank you all. Goodbye.
This is actually a rainbow of ideas and perspectives. So we saw that rainbow.
Thank you so much, gentlemen. It was so wonderful.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. I'm ending this meeting, and this would be uploaded after editing on YouTube channel Bizemag. Please subscribe and share it among your circles. It was live on LinkedIn, so that you can always share from my profile. And it was live on Twitter also of Bizemag. So this bizemag.com, that is our
Why don't you tag
handle
us
name.
on LinkedIn, etc.?
We will.
Vaneeta?
Yes,
Is-
that I will do. That I will
She
do.
will do that.
बस
Yes.
आप टैग करोगे अपने आप सबके पास आ जाएगा
Sure.
LinkedIn पे तो
My connection request to you is pending on LinkedIn. Brigadier Sanjay Aggarwal.
Okay, I am a
Okay.
very poor guy on LinkedIn. I am a sleeping partner type. Let me
We
see.
got connected long back, right?
Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much. I'm
Thank you so
ending
much.
now.
Bye bye everyone.
Thank you.
Jai
Bye-bye.
Hind.
Bye bye.
Bye.